It's so freaking good. It's like cocaine. Hello, everybody. It is Ian Lives. When you think of horror, you probably think of the 80s, horror movies that came out in the 80s. Um, the 80s are like that. If you're a horror fan, you're gonna go to the 80s. So I thought, why not do a video where I go over my favorite horror movie from every single year of the 80s. I got this idea from Planet CHH. I've seen other people do it, but I saw him do it, and I was like, okay, that's a good idea. I'll do that because that should be pretty easy. Obviously, I have not seen every single 80s horror movie, so if you're like, oh, how come you didn't pick this for 83? It's clearly the best horror movie, one of the best horror movies ever made. I probably have not seen it, or I'm just not huge on it. But if I have seen it and it's a big movie, I will be talking about it. We like to keep it horror. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to make videos anymore. Anyways, 1980. I'm also going to be doing honorable mentions before I say my absolute favorite. For 1980, there's a lot of great horror movies that came out this year. This was during like a transitional period where obviously most of, if not all of these movies were probably filmed in the 70s. So they still have that kind of grainy grindhouse 70s feel to it, unlike the 80s sleaze that we end up getting throughout the decade. I'm just going to say this right off the bat. This was an easy choice for me for the final decision because it actually happens to be my favorite horror movie of all time. But again, before we get to that, I'm going to be mentioning some honorable mentions. Very close. I almost picked 1980 Fade to Black. This movie's underrated as hell. I've talked about it ad nauseum. Dennis Christopher movie where it's a character study about this guy who's obsessed with like mobster movies from the 20s and 30s, and he obviously has some sort of mental issue. He has a lot of issues with his life. Eventually he snaps. He takes personas of characters that he loves from the movies that he's obsessed with, and he goes on a killing spree. And he obsesses over this woman who looks like Marilyn Monroe. It's a very cool movie. I absolutely love it. Fade to Black. Please check it out. It almost won for 1980. Of course, this is probably going to be the majority answer. The Shining came out in 1980. And yeah, I would have put it as my favorite, but again, favorite. I know the title of the video is the best. That just sounds more clickable and more fun. But we're doing my favorite, my personal favorite. Not what I think is the best movie, the best made movie, the best movie at its core. No. What do I enjoy the most from these years is what I'm going off of. And The Shining is one of those movies that always take me a while to grab a hold of. I have to be in a very specific mood to want to see it. I've only seen it 3 or 4 times. The last time I saw it was when Shelley Duvall passed away. And I only really rewatched it because she passed away. And I wasn't in a mood for it. You have to have 3 hours spared, and also you have to... It's a slow movie, and there's a lot of weirdness in it. But obviously, Jack Nicholson, easily his best performance. Shelley Duvall, like, come on. And it's an iconic movie. And it might be blasphemy that it's not my favorite movie of 1980, but who cares? Another honorable mention, Dressed to Kill. More of a thriller, but still, I'm pretty sure this is Brian De Palma? Maybe I'm making that up. I'm not sure. I think it's him. Great movie. Murder mystery, giallo-esque thriller movie that has a really, really, really cool twist. I had to shout out Dressed to Kill. And also, I had to give my flowers to the original Prom Night. Prom Night got me into slashers, specifically like 80s slashers. I watched that movie like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. And I was like, wow, I want to deep dive into horror. I need to, because this is like a specific feeling that this movie has that I love. Very grainy, slow, but fun slasher film that has a lot of cool kills in it, a lot of good moments. The whole final act of Prom Night is incredible. Jamie Lee Curtis, coming off the heights of Halloween. I mean, come on. Come on. I had to shout out Prom Night. But my favorite movie of 1980 is Maniac. Again, it's my favorite horror movie of all time, so it kind of immediately won. I was debating between Fade to Black and Maniac for just a little bit because there's days where I enjoy Fade to Black more, but Maniac is just, it's, might even be my favorite movie, period. Joe Spinell, amazing performance. I did a whole video about this, by the way. I think I called it the filthiest horror movie of all time. It got a lot of views. It did really well for the channel. Go check out that video if you want to hear my full thoughts on the movie. But it is such a gritty, dark, gross, filthy movie that I think depicts serial killers really well. You're in the POV, basically, of the serial killer, and it's a slower paced movie, but it's super effective with some of the best scenes in the horror genre, period, with the Tom Savini scene and the subway scene. Maniac is absolutely perfection, masterpiece in my opinion, and it immediately won for 1980. 1981, this one was also kind of easy. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that it wasn't easy, but we're going to start off with the honorable mentions. Friday the 13th Part 2, one of my favorites in that franchise. If you noticed, I did not have the first one in my honorable mentions for last year, just because it's one of the weaker ones in the franchise in my opinion. But also, I just think Part 2 does everything much better. Obviously, you get Jason in the mix, but also, like, the final girl might be my favorite final girl of the franchise. But Baghead Jason is my favorite look for Jason. And yeah, I think that Friday the 13th Part 2 is easily one of the best in that franchise. Might be my favorite. Also had to shout out Halloween 2, which I also really love that movie. Possession, of course, a huge cult classic hit that took me a long time to watch, but when I finally watched it, I understood why it was so loved. Very weird, very strange movie, but also aged like fine wine because it's reminiscent to some of the artsy, more obscure, weird horror movies that are coming out nowadays. And people are mad that they're remaking it, but I'm actually pretty excited because I think it would benefit off a remake, in my opinion. Robert Pattinson is supposed to be in it. But yeah, Possession, had to shout that one out. Also, American Werewolf in London, had to shout that one out. Some of the best practical effects in the horror genre. One of the best werewolf movies I've seen. Very iconic movie with an amazing soundtrack. I had to shout out that one. And then also The Burning, which is basically Friday the 13th, but in my opinion, better. It is better than the original Friday the 13th. I will die on that hill. I love The Burning. One of those horror slasher one-offs that should have and could have easily been turned into a franchise. Very cool killer design with Cropsy, with the murder weapon being shears or whatever they, like gardening shear things. Yeah, it's a great movie. I love The Burning. I watch it every summer. So I had to shout that one out. But my favorite movie for 1981 is hands down The Evil Dead. Yeah, as soon as I thought of the year 1981, I was like, Evil Dead. Probably my favorite horror franchise of all time. And Evil Dead isn't even my favorite one in that franchise. The first one is a masterpiece, but it's still not my favorite. But we're going to get to that. Easily one of the best horror movies ever made, especially considering how low budget and DIY it really was. Bruce Campbell is incredible. It is very serious, and it's even better once you know how the franchise goes. And I envy anybody who has never seen the Evil Dead movies. I really do, because they are life-changing to me, and yeah, some of the most fun I ever have is watching an Evil Dead movie. And the first one has that gritty, authentic feel that none of the other ones have replicated. I had to put Evil Dead for my 1981 pick. 1982, also a very easy one to choose. I immediately thought of it, and I was like, there's no way anything is beating it. But honorable mentions, Basket Case almost won. One of my favorite creature features of all time. Frank Henenlotter, one of my favorite horror directors, period. I love Basket Case to death, and it almost won, but it didn't. Pieces was also pretty close up there. One of my favorite Italian movies and slashers. Um, yeah, very brutal movie. Murder mystery, whodunit, detective, classic giallo thing. Um, with an amazing kills scene in the shower. I think it was a shower where she goes in the elevator and it's all like one, I think it's one take, unless I'm just making stuff up at this point, but I remember being on the edge of my seat during that scene. I've only seen Pieces once or twice, but it's an immediate favorite for me. I love Pieces. um I also wanted to shout out Alone in the Dark. This movie is a Jack Shoulder film that stars Donald Pleasance, also the dude from the Star Trek show. Yeah, I really love this movie. I think it's super overlooked and underrated, where you follow this town and there's a huge power outage and the asylum doors open. So now all these loonies are loose and they're breaking into people's houses and they're stalking and assaulting them, and it's an amazing movie. Alone in the Dark, had to shout it out. Also wanted to show some love to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, because it is one of my favorites of the Halloween franchise. And I love Tom Atkins and I had to show him some love. But ultimately, at the end, of course, I chose John Carpenter's The Thing for 1982. This was a no-brainer, and I think this is going to be everybody's choice because it is one of, if not the greatest horror movie of all time. And I said this before, but like, I hate when people say you can't be a horror fan if you don't like or if you haven't seen this. I don't like when people say that, but I truly mean it when I say this. You cannot be a horror fan. You cannot call yourself a fan of the horror genre if you have never seen John Carpenter's The Thing. It is a great display of horror and practical effects and how to make a good remake way back in the 80s when remakes weren't even trending. So, The Thing immediately won 1982. 1983, another no-brainer for me because it's my second favorite movie of all time. But honorable mentions, there weren't a lot this year. I was looking through. There were some classics, some that I actually have not seen yet, but ultimately there's only two honorable mentions. Got to shout out Videodrome. Cronenberg, very weird, interesting, ahead of its time movie with phenomenal visuals that will stick in your head, and it's a great movie. Also, John Carpenter's Christine, I had to shout out because that is one of my favorite John Carpenter films, and it's crazy to think that that came out right after The Thing. Like, John Carpenter was not playing around. But I did choose Sleepaway Camp. It is my second favorite movie of all time. Used to be my favorite. There's something about Sleepaway Camp that is so addictive and fun and mesmerizing, where you watch the movie and you feel like you're in the universe. Amazing characters, very, very, very campy, goofy, and funny, and of its time, but it's so freaking good. It's like cocaine. All of the kills are super amazing. I think people sleep on the practical effects in this movie, and I highly recommend, if you have the Scream Factory Blu-ray, check out the documentary because it goes over some of the effects and how they did it, especially with that kid that was in the boat that had the snake going through his mouth. Also, the kill scene with the bees. There's some amazing stuff in here. Obviously, the twist ending, which is amazing even after you know what's coming. It's one of the greatest and most bizarre and shocking, jaw-dropping twists in the horror genre, and I cannot share my love for Sleepaway Camp enough. It is a no-brainer for me. I picked it for 1983. 1984, this one was kind of easy, but there was also a lot of good ones in here. For my honorable mentions, I'm going to shout out the Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. The fan favorite of the franchise. Not my personal favorite, but it's definitely up there. I would say it paved the way for slashers even more than the previous three in this franchise did. Just like the way that the characters act, the different cliches and everything. I feel like Friday the 13th 4 really set up the slasher genre to go down a great path. Jason at his meanest arguably. Great final characters and just a great cast of characters, period. I can't talk. Also, one of my favorite 80s horror comedies, Night of the Comet. I had to shout that one out because I really do love it. End of the world, post apocalyptic, even like a zombie film at times, with amazing comedy. It's very reserved and grounded because you're in LA with just like 3 or 4 characters throughout the entire runtime because it's an apocalypse. This comet struck, and only the people who didn't see the comet are alive and walking around. Very interesting. I would say if you guys like zombie movies, you're gonna like Night of the Comet because it does some of the same cliches that zombie movies do. But at the end of the day, my 1984 movie of the year, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm gonna do a whole ranking on this franchise. I'm currently rewatching them. I just rewatched Nightmare on Elm Street 1 2 nights ago now. It still holds up. One of those iconic movies that get better the more you watch it. There's a reason why it's one of the most iconic horror movies of all time. It gave birth to not only Freddy Krueger, one of the most iconic characters in film, point blank period, but also Heather Langenkamp with Nancy, one of the greatest final girls. And you get Johnny Depp in here, and there's amazing kill scenes. Every single kill scene is incredible. All of the dream sequences are incredible. That scene in the school with the body bag is one of the greatest scenes in the entire movie. I have to shout out the scene toward the beginning with, I think her name was Tina or Lisa or something like that. The girl who was having the nightmares, the friend. Like, it's crazy that this movie came out in 84 when you literally have somebody flying across the bedroom. I could not imagine seeing that in theaters during the premiere. Seeing a body flying across the roof, getting smacked around. It's an insane scene even to this day. It's gotta be Nightmare on Elm Street for 84. Has to be. For 1985, a lot of great movies this year. For my honorable mentions, I had to shout out A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Once you guys see my ranking, I'm not going to say much about this, don't want to spoil my ranking, but I do absolutely love Nightmare on Elm Street 2. But also Return of the Living Dead, had to shout that one out. One of the most iconic horror comedies and zombie movies of all time. That I've only seen a couple times, but it's still a favorite of mine. I love it. And there's some amazing scenes. It's hilarious. Like, hilarious. There's no going around it. It is an amazing horror comedy. Also wanted to shout out Demons. Italian movie, basically a zombie movie, but with demons, where they're in this theater. It's a very hectic, stressful movie. Another movie I've only seen once, I think, but it's still stuck with me, and I wanted to shout it out. But my movie for 1985 is going to be Reanimator. Yeah, all-timer, top 10 horror film for me. I love Reanimator to death. Such a brilliant horror comedy that's super ahead of its time. There's some, again, just like guttural laughing moments in here, especially when they're trying to test the activator on the dead body in the morgue. That scene is hilarious. Yeah, and the chemistry between Jeffrey Combs and the other dude is incredible. You get Barbara Crampton. There's amazing scenes. That scene with the cat in the basement. Yeah, Reanimator's a masterpiece. I like, again, this one, there's a lot of good movies in 85, but like once I saw that Reanimator came out in 85, I was like, it's gotta be Reanimator. Has to be. 1986, this year was pretty stacked for me. A lot of my personal favorites were in this year. Honorable mentions, this is probably going to be the pick that you guys pick. This is probably going to be the fan pick that everybody picks. The Fly, another Cronenberg masterpiece, some would argue. I think it's really, really, really good. I'd have to watch it again. I think I've only seen it once or twice, but it's an amazing creature feature with, again, jaw-dropping practical effects. It's another remake, and Jeff Goldblum is incredible in it. Probably a career winner for him. Probably his best role. And it's a very gross, scary, edge of your seat, anxiety, stressful movie that goes in a lot of crazy twists and turns that has you glued to the screen. So The Fly. Also, Aliens, more of an action movie than a horror movie, but it's still extremely iconic. Only reason why I didn't win this year is because it is not my favorite of the Alien franchise. TCM 2, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Yeah, my favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I believe. I don't know. I think that's what I had as my number one when I did that ranking last summer. I don't know. I haven't seen that ranking video in a while, but you guys can watch that ranking video if you want to know my thoughts on the movie completely. But again, I'm a huge fan of horror comedies, and this is one of my favorite ones. I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And also my favorite Friday the 13th, Jason Lives. Had to shout this one out. It's the name of the channel. Ian Lives, Jason Lives. Yeah, come on. Yeah, Jason Lives is my favorite Friday the 13th. There's no going around it. It's so much fun. It's another horror comedy. They throw comedy in it, and yeah, it's just fun. They were like, why not? Let's just bring back Jason Frankenstein style and have him rip shit up and make an extremely fun movie. Also, Night of the Creeps, another one of my favorite horror comedies, and April Fool's Day, one of my favorite slasher movies that has an incredible twist. But at the end of the day, for 1986, I chose Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. If you guys are a fan of this channel, you knew that was coming because I'm a huge serial killer movie fan, and I also talked about this in my serial killer horror movie video. Yeah, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, next to Maniac, is my favorite serial killer movie and is one of my favorite horror movies. The performances are super gripping and believable, and it's a very disturbing movie that feels like you're watching a live leak footage of a serial killing where these people just don't mess around. They are brutal. They are serial killers. They are filming it on tape. And the ending to this movie is incredible. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer is one of those movies that I will always think about no matter how long it's been since I've seen it. And I think it's absolutely incredible. So yeah, I picked that for 86. For 87, this one was pretty easy, but there's still some other great ones in the honorable mentions. I wanted to shout out a movie called The Hidden, another Jack Shoulder movie, where you have these detectives that are trying to figure out what's going on with this guy. He's like a weird monster. He's doing things to the city. He's terrorizing people. And it gets linked to this huge like experiment thing, and it's a very sick sci-fi horror movie. It's got Kyle MacLachlan in it. It's a very fun movie, and I really want to shout out The Hidden. Also, The Stepfather, one of the best thriller horror movies out there. It's shocking that this wasn't a 90s thriller movie because it was so ahead of its time. Very simple concept where you have this guy who gets married to a family and then kills the family. And he kind of changes his name and he goes to a different family. Very creepy concept. It gets executed really well. And I had to shout that one out. Also, Creepshow 2. I like it more than Creepshow 1. One of my favorite anthologies. And had to shout out Creepshow 2. Also, Italian horror slasher Stage Fright, I really enjoy. That came out this year. And also the Italian movie Opera, which has amazing scenes in it. Very brutal movie. But, again, easy pick. For 87, I chose Evil Dead 2. The greatest horror comedy of all time, in my opinion, next to Shaun of the Dead. The best of the Evil Dead franchise. It's close with Army of Darkness for me, but I still really love Evil Dead 2. It is so campy, slapstick, funny, obnoxious, all at the same time. There's nothing wrong with the movie. It's incredible. It's one of those movies where you are laughing out loud at it, and then the next moment you are scared and in awe of practical effects and all that. It's like, what other movie are you going to get Bruce Campbell dancing with lamps and couches and chairs and then covered in blood? You're not going to. It's so iconic. With the hand. Jesus, dude. Evil Dead 2. It's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. In my opinion, I had to choose it for 87. 1988, um, I've said this before, but I think 88 is my favorite year for horror. I absolutely love it. So for honorable mentions, I chose Killer Clowns from Outer Space. This one was close to getting my movie of the year because I love it. Again, horror comedy, bias, but still, um, such a fun movie that took me a while to love. First time I watched it, I thought it was good. I think I gave it like a 3.5. I rewatched it. I was like, wow, this is actually like really good. Gave it a 4. Watched it again. I was like, wow, this is even better. 4.5. I think now I have it at a 5 star on Letterboxd because like every time I watch it, I get more enjoyment out of it. It's such a fun, bizarre, bonkers movie that I'm still surprised doesn't have. It literally had no other form of entertainment until the video game last year. Before that, there was no sequels. There was no TV show, no spinoff, no anything. We didn't even get merchandise for this movie until about 3 or 4 years ago, which is insane to me. Killer Clowns from Outer Space should be a huge franchise. Child's Play as well. I mean, Chucky, one of the most iconic horror killers of all time, and Child's Play. It's a really damn good movie. Only reason why I didn't put it as my movie of the year is because it's not my favorite Chucky movie. Also wanted to shout out a very underrated, unseen slasher horror movie from 1988 called Out of the Dark. This is another horror comedy. You get a small role from Divine. Yeah, really, really, really funny, fun movie about this sex call. It's like I think they work at like they're sex workers and it's like a sex hotline or something, and this killer is killing the people through the hotline. I don't know. I don't completely remember. I just remember having a blast with it. It's a Giallo-esque detective murder mystery, even like a Nancy Drew type movie that's really fun, very clever, and again ahead of its time. Had to shout out of the Dark, but again, for 88, I chose The Blob, another practical effects masterpiece remake. The Blob, I watched it for the first time maybe 2 years ago, I think now, and I liked it a lot. But I rewatched it, and it blew me away. I don't know what was wrong with me the first time I watched it, but it's an instant masterpiece now. Like, I watched that movie, and I'm like, this might have better practical effects than The Thing. There's times where I think that, because there are kills in this movie that are just absolutely amazing. That first scene where they're in the hospital, like, holy shit. There's some scenes in The Blob that it's hard to believe that it came out in the 80s, but I had to choose it for 88. The Blob is incredible, and I mean, come on. I think I don't want to say it's underrated, because it's a well-known movie and a lot of people know about The Blob, but like, it's underrated in the sense of people saying it's a masterpiece and it's one of the greatest 80s horror movies out there. I think it's underrated in that sense because it truly is. It is up there in The Thing and The Fly conversation for me. You want to talk about practical effects? I'm talking about The Blob before I talk about The Thing. I'm sorry. The Thing is incredible. The practical effects are probably better than The Blob, but there's something about The Blob that I just think is so fun. 88 gets The Blob for me. And 1989, again, this one was easy for me. People are going to hate this pick because a lot of people hate this movie. But honorable mentions first. Intruder. Intruder almost won it. I think the first YouTube video I ever made was talking about Intruder, how it's the most underrated slasher of all time. I still agree. People say it's not really underrated anymore. Okay, I don't care. It's still an underrated slasher. Slasher in a grocery store that is all shot in one location. Very short movie. The twist is very obvious, especially if you know what the twist is. You're like, how did I not know that the first time around? Small role from Bruce Campbell. You get Sam Raimi in here as an acting performance. I think you get Ted Raimi as well. Because the guy who directed it, I think, went to school with Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and all them. Very fun movie. Amazing kills. That utilize the store scenery perfectly. Some dumb, stupid, schlocky comedy as well. Thrown into it. Intruder is one of my favorites for sure. Also, the movie Parents, which I think is also super underrated. It's got Randy Quaid in it. A movie about this kid who thinks his parents are cannibals, and he's trying to figure out. He's trying to catch them in the act of being a cannibal because he just has this feeling that they are. So he's like sneaking out. He's spying on them. Very creepy movie. A dark comedy as well. And then also Madman, which I put in my recommended horror movie video. It's a movie about this bookworm. She loves books, and she reads this book, and the events that she's reading about are happening in real life as she's reading it. Very cool concept, and I love that movie. But for my movie of the year for 1989, I chose Halloween 5. Yeah, most people's least favorite in the Halloween franchise, but it's my favorite in the Halloween franchise, and also one of my favorite slasher movies of all time. Halloween 5, dude. It's like junk food. It's comfort food. I'm stressed out. I have anxiety or something like that. I plop on Halloween 5. I get scared. I ooh all over the kills. I laugh at how over the top it is. Like, there's just something about Halloween 5 where it mixes everything together. Walk into it expecting a campy horror comedy and you will have a blast. Trust me. You walk into it expecting a movie like the original Halloween or some of the other tones of the Halloween movies. You're not going to have fun. It's a super goofy ass movie, but I love it to death. Dr. Loomis over the top in this movie, shaking that poor little girl around. There's just something so good about Halloween 5 to me. And it's easily my favorite for 89. I absolutely love Halloween 5 to death. So yeah, that was my video for the best horror movie from every year of the 80s. I hope you guys enjoyed this idea. Again, shout out to Planet CHH, who also did this with the 80s, 90s, and I think he just released his one for the 2000s. So yeah, it's a cool concept. It's very fun to do. If you guys want me to do the 90s and 2000s, maybe even the 70s, let me know. 2010s, I'll do them because these are easy videos to make. And it's also a good way to recommend movies and also talk about some of my favorites. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please follow my Letterboxd at wehateian. Follow my Instagram at ianlives_. Follow my X or Twitter account, Ian Lives Forever. I might post on there. I might not. I don't know yet, but I'm just going to put it out there. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for all the love and support of me coming back. All you guys are like, oh, I missed you so much. I missed you. I missed you. I missed you. You don't have to lie to me. You can say it was much better without me here. And I won't mind, okay? I'm kidding. I love you guys. Thanks for all the support. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.